I'm Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm here with Chris Grant, who's the former Law Tech Director for Barclays Ventures. Hi, Chris.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Living the lockdown dream, as we know.
Totally. I love that I now have to wave at everyone. I didn't go into meeting rooms and go hi before the start of it, but now that's apparently what I do.
It's like we're on a children's programme.
Totally.
And I referred to you as former Law Tech Director at Barclays Ventures. So because I was hoping we might do a big reveal, but actually we're not there yet, are we? You're gonna
have to wait. Gonna have to wait.
Wait to reveal. You actually got a new job.
Indeed. I'm not going to be enjoying life of yoga retreats and gardening. It will be something else to be revealed.
We will reveal it soon. So we're here to talk about innovation in service delivery in all of its rounds. So you've got, I'll let you, I have the habit of talking more than the people thing, as you know. So, but in terms of your background is very interesting. So you've obviously worked at Freshfields for a bit, then you worked at Barclays Capital, you took over as COO of Barclays Wealth. So you've had, and then I'll leave you to come to talk as we go through about the venture side. So you've had that in-house perspective, and also so you've worked very much with an in-house head-on, and then also very much within the startup community itself. So we're going to talk about how firms should be applying innovation in service delivery in a more meaningful way.
Yeah.
Did I get all your background history right? Just give us a better potted history.
Spot on. So look, I mean, I look back at it now, and obviously it's been something I've been thinking a lot about now, where I've had a funny little route, but has taken me probably to the place where I was destined to be in many ways, because I was always frustrated. I always, even if I go back to doing my degree, I was doing law and business. I was never happy just doing one thing, and kind of. It was only really when I got to Barclays Capital and started to find out that there was a whole other bit of managing legal functions as a business that really started to appeal. So that's what it's been. I spent very little time actually doing any legal work, and have since been very much focused on legal ops and thinking about how we could do things better, more effectively and more efficiently. And I think being in the financial services sector, where obviously we've gone through the toughest of times and costs has been high up in the agenda now for a long time, it's what's really been the catalyst, I think, for forcing that change or forcing us to think about different ways of doing things. So it's been an interesting journey, and being within Barclays as long as I have and seeing all the different changes that happen there. And it feels like every year we've got something new to do because there's still the cost constraints that we need to work under, and trying to find the right model and the right way of working. I think what was good about Barclays is they weren't shy of trying something new, and let's see where we get to. So it really helped to evolve thinking and drive things forward and do things in different ways. So it was really interesting, and latterly being able to work with our law firms when I started doing the bits around the external engagement team, and talking to our firms about what we wanted in terms of our expectations of them, and starting to drill into those into greater detail than we probably ever did before, because we wanted to get on the same page. Kind of took me towards the innovation piece, because that was one of the elements we started to test firms on in terms of what they were doing from an innovation perspective to drive efficiencies. And it's not just tech, it's everything, as we know. It's people, processes, and tech in there to a certain extent. And that really opened my eyes, because some were doing amazing things, some were doing very depressing things, and I can tell a few anecdotal stories about those later. But it really opened the door to, everybody's just trying to find their way, right? It's early days for legal technology in earnest. There's been around for a long time for sure, but have we been using it to the best that we could? And have we created an environment where we can do all of that? And that's where the ventures bit became exciting, because we had Eagle Labs, which were the incubators up and down the country, 25 incubators, 26 I think we probably had at the time that I moved, which were all focused on innovation and technology. And we dedicated one of those labs to law tech, had a great group of partners that we worked with in there, including many of our law firms, the Law Society, a real community that had never really been brought together before. and of course some great startups. So it was finally, I'm in a position where I felt like I'd come full circle and thought about all the challenges that I was frustrated with as a lawyer, and in terms of trying to work in that environment and do things, to then how do you manage an in-house function to its best ability and drive greater efficiencies. And the bit that was kind of missing was the technology piece, which you need to be able to help make all of that happen. So being exposed to what has been over the last 3 years some great people in the law tech community, it has been fantastic, of course, which is you're very much one of those. So thank you again for letting me come in to talk.
No, thank you. It's always fun to talk to you. I was just making sure that my phone wasn't about to ring, just to be perfectly frank. Interviews at home. No, so that's brilliant. So let's talk about the first bit. So we're going to talk about, but in terms of I know I've read a few bits that you've written about the frustrations in terms of firms not innovating, and I do want to hear some of the anecdotes or anecdote, because I know you were working. I know I'm familiar with the work that you're doing, and Barclays has always been pushing the envelope. So in terms of the past, I think no conversation really could start without acknowledging the past year. So COVID, I know you mentioned have been saying that there's obviously been an acceleration of things like really simple things, e-signatures, which were something that the legal sector really trailed on very easily. There's been adoption of bigger, more adoption of tech. In terms of what, with your in-house hat on, has the past year gone a way, a long way, some way towards addressing some of the sort of failings or the gap in the expectation between the likes of Barclays and where they actually were?
Look, I think it's been a year that we could never have predicted in many respects, and of course from personal perspective, but also from what it has done to open up thinking, right? I think that's the biggest thing that we've achieved, is we are now all in a situation where we've had to adapt and we've had to adopt new ways of working, which we've been almost actively resistant to. And nobody likes change. Even the people that say they like change, they like change if it works in their favor, right? It's not anything that any of us are necessarily comfortable with. So it's definitely opened up minds, therefore people are out and looking for new ways of working and more actively doing that. And certainly I was expecting everything to kind of go dead for all of our startups, and they find already it was a challenge for them to have conversations and get engagement. And you think that with everybody just getting their heads around remote working and trying to respond to new challenges, it would drop down the agenda potentially. It didn't. And that was the really exciting piece, where people were more engaged and there was more of an opportunity because we had to. I've always said that I think the biggest change for us in-house and certainly within the bank was the financial crisis. I mean, we had to therefore change. We had to respond to cost challenges that we never had before, and that has its ripple effect. So we needed to fundamentally just start to rip up the rule book, even if there was one, and think about new ways of doing things. And the legal industry needed that. Law firms needed that. And let's be honest, they're never going to be in a situation where they're suddenly strapped for cash. There's always going to be the need for legal services. But COVID's kind of done that a little bit. It's brought about that change. That means we're seeing more tech people stepping into law firms. We're seeing a growth in their role. We're seeing them getting the ability to do some of the stuff that they've always wanted to. It's not been a massive change, but it's a significant shift towards opening the doors to allowing tech to start to take a hold in the industry. And it's brought together a community of people to talk about it. And we're starting to tackle some of the problems that we know that are there that has stopped the adoption of technology from before. So it's definitely been a catalyst, and I think we're just at the point now where I think there's going to be good acceleration in all of this, because we're getting our act together. Finally, everybody's getting their act together, and it gives us the opportunity to really consider how we should be doing things, but importantly, how do we unblock all those challenges that have prevented us from being able to take on new technology.
So it's so many things to unpack. So it's a case of the technology and doing things differently are not necessarily the same thing, are they?
Yeah.
So
no.
So I know that firms. So do you see that firms? So in the past, pre-COVID, there was a lot of innovation by press releases. We know there was a lot of I'm dealing with a startup.
A lot of hot air.
And so it's great to know that Google Labs is still, but I imagine that's being, they're approaching that in a more meaningful way. But are they, if nothing, because their budgets are being cut or work up, but so are they doing things in a, it's about creating deep change, isn't it? It's about looking at not just oh well, I need this contract management system, or it's about how do I work and reinvent my process. The trouble is that law firms, as you said, they're making money still. How they're doing that is perhaps another conversation, but they are making money still. But are they still, do you think they're really putting innovation at the heart of service delivery and learning the lessons, or not?
Not as much as I would like. I think there's, and I think that's probably the biggest thing to draw out, is there's starting to be a bigger gap form between firms now than there were before. And I've always said that the service delivery element is the bit that's going to start to separate them, because there's all this technology and there's different ways of working and there's new ways of doing things, and that's always going to be great, but it's never going to be what sets you apart from your competitors in the market. Certainly with my old Barclays hat on, if I sit there and think about what it was that stood out from the firms that I was working with, it was those that were starting to create this package that was that whole complete service delivery piece for me, that was making my life, or our life at the bank, easier, because they were working out how to align themselves to the expectations, which we were now being clear about. Because how can you even measure performance if you don't know what your expectations are, and the person you're working with doesn't know what your expectations are? We need to be clear around those.
At that point, that means you were introducing KPIs, weren't you? You were introducing clear objectives and tasks, which was actually quite unusual at the time.
Totally. And it's putting flags in the sand to say, this is the stuff that we want to get from you, and if we don't get it from you, we're going to have a problem. But recognizing that we couldn't just do a course change, that was a journey that we all needed to go on. So it was a lot of time spent, and we had a great team, and Stephanie Hammond that headed up the team, amazing in terms of setting that direction and that agenda, but making it a very inclusive piece. And I'm sure there's firms that are going, I remember relationship meetings with you. It wasn't so two ways, but on the whole, I mean, that's very much what it was trying to go on that journey. So it becomes important to set those KPIs and be clear around what they are, because then you've got a starting point to work from and develop from. So it is that differentiator that's starting to happen, and some are getting really serious about the service delivery piece, and they are. I mean, I think one of the telling things for me is the people that you're starting to see move around now, and it's bringing the right people in to have the right conversation. It was always one of the things that we pushed for, is typical relationship meetings. It would be the senior lawyers on our side and the senior lawyers from the law firm side. Brilliant, great, but you've been talking to each other all year, and you might not necessarily know the best piece about the innovation stuff, or what you're doing from a D&I perspective, or what you're doing around your pricing element. So bring the right people in to have those conversations. And having done 30 of those deep dives with our 30 top firms that was purely into innovation. That was one. I mean, we did them. It was amazing. We did them around D&I. We did them around innovation, because there were two new pieces that we set as our expectations. And it was fascinating just seeing the broad spectrum of who kind of came through the door and what they wanted to talk about. There were firms that when we talked about innovation, they brought in their innovation team. And it's an innovation team we didn't know existed, that they were buried so deep within the organization. But they were great people. And we had some of the most fantastic conversations to think about how we could be working in the future. And it was brilliant. And then you would have other ones where, again, the senior partner would be rolled out, and delighted always to see the senior partner getting rolled out, and lovely to have a conversation with them. But you've got an hour and a half where you're going to deep dive into innovation, and your conversation starts with, what are you doing that's innovative? And they've moved offices, and they've changed the way that the office layout is, so that the partners sit by the window and look out. Well, where they used to sit by the window and overlook the Hudson, they've now moved internally, and they put everybody else out by the windows. I'm like, where do we go with this? I don't know how I can. We've got an hour to fill.
I presume. I mean, I often assume, because we're dealing with probably too much with the biggest law firms. I think my assumptions sometimes are further ahead of where the market actually lays, because obviously, as we know, the biggest firms with the biggest resources are actually further ahead. But do you think? I mean, do you think this is moved on in the conversations that you've been having? I mean, for more firms, but typically the biggest firms have innovation teams. It's not actually as widespread as you think, is it?
No, not at all. And you know, it's easy to have an innovation team, but are you being innovative is the big difference. And it goes back to what we were saying before: is what are they actually doing, and what's their mandate, and do they have the remit to be able to do what they need to do?
And is that so? The remit's really important, isn't it? If you've got the buy-in from the executive, I think because of the law firms being a partnership, we can't escape. I've been a legal journalist since 2004, and the number of conversations I've had about partnership and the partnership model and culture. But you can't. It's not going away.
Can't avoid it.
No, and so I guess so you need to. So you've mentioned people moving around. So a lot of the key. So in terms of firms that are making progress, having the right people. And who have buy-in at the executive level, and I guess it's about creating a space in which they can innovate. Perhaps in doing that, whether it be, and actually I've seen, as I know that you've seen a ton more, examples of, how you create that space, and whether it be within your own ALSP or whether you've actually whether you've got a firm that is brave enough to create an internal alternative team. But which is difficult because it's hard to protect it from the billable hour. Is that right? Like you see, like how do we carve out that space in order to create meaningful change?
And I think that's probably been the bit that's been most interesting is, I've had a lot of time I've had a lot of conversations over the last few months with firms and with people in this space, and the number of firms that actually have just kind of come clean. I think particularly now that I've kind of stepped away from external engagement management, where it's like we don't know what to do, what should we do?
Really?
And that I found really fascinating, because it's been people are being honest, and actually there's no right solution to this. I don't think there's one blueprint where I could just say this is what you need to do within your organization to be able to make this work. It is about having that dialogue and starting to think about exactly that piece of creating the void that can be filled by the right people. And I've got a view that it needs to be led by the client in many respects. You have to have your client engaged, or your clients engaged in that piece, because you've got to build something. And to build something, you've got to understand what you're building it for. And if you don't know your clients well enough to understand how you could fit into all of that, it's going to be very difficult to build the right team. I think individuals and bringing people that offer something different to what you've had before. And I was reading another article, I can't remember who wrote the article, another LinkedIn one earlier, about how every time you look for any role within legal, legal ops, whatever it is, it's always must be a lawyer, or have been a lawyer, or have had experience of working in a law firm. And actually those aren't the people that you want in. You want the person that went to university and has studied business management or in tech or innovation for the last 4 years and been practicing it for 10 years, and not the lawyer that's been dedicated necessarily to doing the legal work. It's bring the right people in to have the right conversation. So going back to your question, I don't think there is a one size fits all approach, but because you've got so many variables to navigate. You've got that partnership that you've got to get the buy-in with, and that's absolutely key. You've got to get a partnership team that supports and buys into the strategic direction that you want to take by forming these teams, but also having that ability to be able to check in and say, well, what is it we want to achieve from having it? Because at some point someone's going to say, well, what have we achieved by doing it? What's the payback? That any business will come through from that perspective. So you've got to know what it is you're trying to achieve to be able to make sure that you achieve it.
So as being as specific as you can. So you've talked about, and then I must come on to the startup market more specifically, because I really want to talk a bit more about that. But so when you talked about that there hasn't been this seismic shift in law firms that you would have hoped. What would, whether it be from an anecdote where you go, this firm nailed it, or what does that actually mean?
I've seen glimmers of it, and there's two things that have always stood out for me, and it's related to the same thing, but it's been this collaboration piece, and it's been seeing firms actually start to work together, and not just work together with each other, but work with their clients as well. Because that has been, we did it at Barclays, where we'd already done kind of process mapping within the legal function, and we'd started to identify where some of our challenges were, and we put these out as problem statements to a group of our panel firms that we were working with. because of the structure that we've got in place, we had ways of being able to make it work, and able to fund it to a certain extent as well. So we were able to create a platform where we could bring the group of firms in, talk about our problems, have our legal team on the other side of it. And that's not just our lawyers, it's our change and transformation people, it's our technology people, and start to focus on these problems. We were doing 12-week sprints around these problems and ultimately came out with some ideas at the end of it. I mean, did we come out with earth-shattering solutions? No, but we came up with some amazing ideas that we could take forward. But most importantly, we'd gone from what was a group of people brought into a room that didn't even talk to each other and were still kind of hiding their homework and not quite sharing everything that they wanted to at the end of it, having a group that were working as a group. It was 5-6 different law firms. And I remember one presentation where there was 3 different law firms up on the stage. There was our Barclays lawyers on the stage and you couldn't tell who was who. You didn't know which firm was which. There was none of the stepping forward with I'm so-and-so from such and such. And they'd even amalgamated their logos at one point. So and you would never have seen a law firm do that, right? You've never seen lawyers do that. It just would not have been the way. So that gave me a little bit of hope that actually it can happen, because I do believe that if we are going to see an acceleration, then we need to do it as a group. We need to be clear around what the problems are that we're trying to solve before we can then think about the solutions that are in there. But we can't do that in silos. It's no good one firm doing it on its own, and they will come up with the solutions for sure, but will it align to their clients' needs? Kind of, but maybe not as well as it could have been. Will they have spent a lot of money? Yep, they absolutely will have done, because they've been doing it on their own. Whereas if we've got a group where we can say, this is what we think the problem is, let's get all the different views around that, and then let's go away and find a solution for it as a collective, we've probably done it quicker. We've probably done it far cheaper than we would have done before. We'd have shared the risk amongst a group and come up with a consensus that would have helped us to move forward. So I think those bits, and it's not easy, you've got to create the right environment for that to happen. I mean, we had to talk an awful lot about just creating a safe space, but you've also got to put the challenge on the table. None of us are great at, certainly in-house or in private practice, clearly identifying what the problem is that we're trying to fix. We just know there's something. So we need to do the kind of work around that. But that gave me a bit of hope. And it happened a second time with the Global Legal Hackathon, where again, through the lab, we brought a group of our partners together and worked on, I mean, it was e-signatures that we worked on. You're like, my God, it's like, not only is, I mean, that party's long gone, but, it's still there, still needed fixing. Yeah. So, that gave me hope again that it can happen. So we need to find more of those opportunities.
I think what's really interesting, and particularly in the last year, is that the tech is moving on to help us, whether, like, so for example, Microsoft Teams and leveraging people's Microsoft stacks. I think that will help people to, I mean, totally. Albeit that it's very early days, and as yet most law firms I've spoken to are not using the collaboration piece, because they're sort of worried about how it's going to, information go, etc. But we're moving on. The platforms are there for people to start collaborating, and also Loophole is another one which is interesting. It's still in early days, but it's about there's tech there to start bringing people together, isn't there, and to start helping help, and we could go on actually in terms of the document management system platform as well. They're sort of so I think that the tech is moving on, isn't it, to sort of help. Totally. And
totally. And if we look, Barclays just brought on Law Advisor, and so they've now got Legal Eye and Fibonacci, which are the 2 bits that look at the instruction of the matters and then also the project management side of things as well. And what's great about them, and I think we're seeing this with more technologies, like you say, is everybody's finding ways of making stuff connect and work with the technology that's already there. We know we don't use it as well as we should be doing. And there's huge opportunities around it, but as long as everything's disconnected, there's no easy way of doing that. And these technologies now that are coming forward are able to seamlessly integrate with what you've already got and start to plug into the other technologies. And the startups that are out there are talking to each other to work out how to integrate properly. I mean, we've seen it happen within fintech. We know what APIs can do, and open code can help to move forward. It's starting to happen around the legal industry, and it's just going to accelerate. And as long as we've got smart folk like those at Law Advisor coming with these great ideas, which has been a game changer for Barclays. It's really significantly changed things, the way that we've worked, and given us huge opportunities to embed much of what we've been doing through the panel process, and helping us around transparency and cost efficiency, all the stuff that we needed. If you think about it from a perspective of, I have that wish list of expectations that I need. It's the value for money, the collaboration and teamwork, and all the innovation pieces. The startups are ticking that list for me. And actually they're ticking it for the law firms, and the law firms haven't even realized it yet. That's what we need to kind of bring together, that tackling exactly the client expectations and providing services that deliver against those is a win-win for everyone.
So with the startups, so one of the issues that has always been the law firm time frame, and also the law firms are not necessarily set up, apart from some of the biggest, to be able to look at what startups do, and they don't have the time, or they think they don't have the time. What do you make of the likes of Rain Court? Is that something that you think? I mean, the Rain Court, for people that don't know, most people do know, is we call it the App Store for Legal. They help with they kind of create, they take care of the onboarding process and security requirements, don't they? Do you think that's one solution? Obviously you've got incubators are different, but do you think that they're going to help? Will that help law firms and help the startups?
So definitely, and looking at some of the stuff that we've been doing. So I've been working, I'm part of the Law Tech Panel UK, and we've just been doing the sandbox trial for the first time, which has been going incredibly well. And because I've always seen that as being one of the things that's going to help to solve some of those bigger challenges, and the conversations that are happening within that group that are helping to solve those problems, like the data issues. We're working with a great team that have got a solution that could unlock the data problem forever and finally get us access to data without actually you needing to access data. It's a company called Regulation, who they are able to, I'm going to really try and simplify this, and I'll probably get it mostly wrong, but being able to kind of put algorithms over the other side of the security firewalls and just spit out the result of the algorithms means you haven't seen the data, but you've been able to get the results that you need out of the other side of it. So we're one of the biggest problems in all of that, because we put the challenges on our law firms, we put cyber controls in, we put supplier controls in place, data privacy controls in place. So we make the demand of our law firms, which then exacerbates the problem, because where they could maybe be a bit more flexible in terms of helping the startups and getting data shared and doing all of those pieces, we're blocking it. But there's really interesting conversations that are helping to finally, because it's not going to get solved overnight, but those conversations being had, and they're being had with a group of people that can actually help to affect that change, and that never was there before. So I do see opportunities for, and I think the Rain Court model is the right direction in terms of how can we find ways of unlocking the challenges that we're facing, and allow tech adoption to happen faster, and not just even the adoption of it. We don't necessarily need to fully adopt some of these ideas, but we need to at least test them. We need to be able to try them out. We need to allow AI to get access to the data that it needs to be able to refine its working and actually really start to pull results. So everybody's there. It's like all the loose bits are there. We've just got to connect it all to make it happen. It's
interesting, isn't it? Because you have a lot of people don't have the resource, and that's on the corporate side as well. And I sometimes wonder. So we've talked a lot in the market about the growth of legal ops, but actually a lot of corporates that I've spoken to do not have legal ops departments still, and they don't. And that's another interesting question, isn't it? Then does it? How do we make sure that, because from our conversation to now in this conversation, a lot of the success you've had is from the corporate driving innovation. If you're sitting here listening, if you're from a smaller corporate, you don't have a legal, you're like, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to create this collaboration between my law firms, which is just not going to happen? It's just they're probably sitting here going, well, this sounds lovely in principle, but this is like,
when you've got the time and the money and the resource to go and do it, then brilliant. Back on.
So we need, it's almost like, so at least things like, I'm fascinated to see what comes out of the sandbox, and we should definitely talk again about that, perhaps do another just exclusive chat about that. But so how do you create a sort of centralized environment? And I do think, going back to Teams and Liquid, I do think perhaps they are the answer, because Microsoft, obviously there's huge investment and creating spaces where you can collaborate, and I think that, and that doesn't mean that that there's still a huge place for dedicated legal tech startups, right? We can potentially plug into that.
Yeah, totally. And it is all to play for. But I do think, and I think it's been the biggest challenge, and that's something that the Eagle Lab started to unlock a bit, is just creating that community, because you have got so many people that are flat out doing the day job, but no matter how big or small, you've got a cost target on your head, and you've got a CFO that's breathing down your neck, and a board that's looking at you. No matter how big or small your team is. So you need to be able to plug into some of these opportunities, but finding ways of doing it in a slick manner, or being able to even access a community that can help to do it, it's getting better. And the lab was starting to do that. There's other stuff that, I mean, I've been using Clubhouse. Who'd have thought? I'm now welcome to the new age. It's taken me a long while to get my head around it.
I keep people's rooms back to it, and then leaving quietly.
I know, it's like, I want to know what the other option is. If I don't leave quietly, what else can I do? That's where there's a community there, particularly around law tech. I mean, it's very US focused at the moment, but the UK is definitely growing. And that's an easy way of just tapping in to hear a conversation and hear what's happening. The sandbox is a great one, because there will be output from that in terms of, these are some of the solutions and this is what they did. And the more of those kind of community things that we can start to drive, and I think that's where firms maybe have an opportunity, is bring together your clients and help them in a way that you really can, by accessing those, bringing some of the great people in that are already speaking in this ecosystem, and talk about their lessons learned. You're really starting to deliver some new value.
All right. Well, look, we're unfortunately going to have to leave that, but Chris, thank you so much. And
absolute pleasure. As always. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. Bye.